My name is Patricia, and I'm a co-coordinator of RISE, and it is my pleasure to start the first RISE lecture series, hopefully one of many in the future. And the person who kindly offered to kick off the RISE Eco series is Estia Delibas, and so we're very pleased to have her today sharing some of her work. Estia is a PhD student at SES in the program Democracy in the 21st Century. And her research topics are social and environmental justice, rural politics, decolonialism, especially in post-socialist areas. She finished her master's in advanced sociological research and her BA in social anthropology at the University of Babis Boliai in Romania. And in 2021, she was part of the program Just Food, from alternative food networks to environmental justice, which was funded by the Foundation for Science of Technology here in Portugal. She received a grant from FCT for her PhD research in SES, and she's also a member of the ECOSOC program. So it's a real pleasure to welcome Estia, who is going to be talking to us about, and I'll just state that the title of her presentation is No One Left to Work the Land, the Environmental Injustice of Land Grabbing. So without further ado, I give the floor to Estia.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for this opportunity to present my doctoral work and also to kind of prepare for my dissertation defense. As you introduced already the subject, I'm going to jump right in just after I figure how to switch. Okay, I found. So a little introduction about land grabbing. It's a growing phenomenon in the world. It draws attention of both scholars and activists, especially in the global south, ever since the 2008 food crisis. Still, it doesn't happen just in the global south, as new research emerged that it also happens in Europe, especially in Eastern Europe, where post-socialist countries have become targets of large-scale land acquisition. In my doctoral research, I used two case studies of land grabbing in Romania to look at multiple layers of injustice emerging from land conflicts, considering insidious forms of violence, but also structural conditions that led to people giving up land. In my research, I found a useful concept that is called pinprick land grabbing, which refers to small, often hidden forms of land grabbing that happens through abusive power relations. These cases are less visible, harder to track by official data. They usually involve rather individual actors than large corporation, and rely on coercion, manipulation, taking advantage of poverty and distress of local populations. Still, over time, this land can end up in corporate control as many different actors become involved in this broader land rush. In my study, I look at land grabbing to an environmental justice framework, and in understanding land grabbing, I found useful the concept of slow violence introduced by Nixon, who differentiates between different forms of violence. Actual violence, structural, but also slow. This framework helps to see land grabbing not as a single extraordinary event, but as a long process of land dispossession in the context of normalization of harms, as Irina talks about. I'm gonna go very briefly to the methodology. As I said, I use two case study method looking in two regions of Transylvania. I use different methods of of research, interviews, participatory observations, informal discussion, but also second data analysis. I interviewed different actors from activists, experts, farmers, workers, and official representatives. Um, Very briefly about the case studies. I'm not gonna bore everyone with the details. You can see in the map where they are located in central Romania, the first case study, which is in Hârtibaciu Valley. This land conflict was brought to attention by a group, an activist group, that made visible the slow land grabbing and enclosure of previous open lands. My second case study is Kolotaseg, Tsarakalate, which is a multi-ethnic region in the east northeast of Romania. Here, the slow land grabbing is happening a bit different than in Hârtibaciu, as land is being grabbed by local elites rather than big corporations. And I will jump to findings so we can go to the juicy part. In this presentation, I'm going to look at land grabbing in three ways. First, I'm going to discuss how land is being appropriated, discussing what I already introduced, the pinprick land grabbing and the violence, the hidden violence that emerged in this process. Then I will talk about the different forms of rural loss that take place in the context of post-socialist transition and that leads to land grabbing. And third, I'm going to discuss land grabbing as a form of emotional violence. As I mentioned, in both case studies, most of land has fallen in the control of either large agri-corporation or local elites. And in both cases, dispossession occurs through small, scattered, and often hidden land grabs, using coercion and exploiting poverty. Now, people mention various ways in which local land grabbers pressure them into giving up land. They talk about threats, about harassment, about taking how they were taking advantage in different forms. They talk about illegal occupation or illegal sowing of seeds on their land, also illegal fencing. These are just some of the tactics used by local land grabbers that slowly made local population give up land. In both cases, the interviews reveal that the violence often comes from the power imbalance between the land grabbers and the landowners. Land grabbers taking advantage of the vulnerable position of local population, especially taking advantage of elderly, ethnic minorities, and women. And here I have a quote that very sharply captures this idea, and I'm gonna read it. All the time, flocks of sheep would sneak in, and before I could go and cut any grass, they had eaten anything. There was nothing I could do, no one to fight with. I kept complaining, but when you're a woman alone, you're not taken seriously. Everyone thinks they can do whatever they want with a woman, and that's that. Another quote above underlines the how land is appropriated through illegal fencing. And I'm gonna read, these people come and put fences around the land, including my own, without even asking, and use it abusively. Another quote from an activist this time captures the same idea about how people find out that their land was enclosed by illegal fencing, and then they are forced through, like in the quote says, forms of intimidation to swap the land to usually a worse position or a worse qualitative one. I'm gonna continue by talking now regarding rural losses in connection to land grabbing, because all of these forms of direct violence that I talk about unfold in the context of pre-existing systemic dispossession, the rural losses that I discuss, and they can be in different forms. We are talking about loss of population, of people, so rural abandonment and the population, loss of infrastructure, loss of machinery and agricultural equipment, a loss of community and communal work practices, also collapse of food production and distribution systems. These losses caused by the systemic abandonment of rural spaces have made it that much harder for local population to sustain their life in the rural area. And this comes in a very specific context of post-socialist transition. And what I argue is that the crisis of social reproduction in the countryside is a driver of land abandonment and ultimately land grabbing. Just a second. And further, I'm going to unpack these different forms of rural loss. First, one of the most important grievances of villages in both case study was regarding to loss of people. As the post-socialist period caught the villages already in a process of depopulation that was only intensified during the post-socialist period. And here a quote that's very much surprised exactly this idea. Before the 90s, people had already started leaving for the city. In the 90s, the young people, many of them left. Because that was the thinking back then, that's how it was supposed to be under the former regime, to depopulate the villages, to leave only few people to work the land. So all the young people left, and even before the 90s. The more the villages become depopulated, so did the more the villages become depopulated, this had a direct effect on the social and cultural life in the village. What was claimed by many is that there is a present felt degradation of social relations, as many felt that there is a disconnection from one another, a sense of growing mistrust that it's felt in all social interactions. And here, again, some quotes that capture this idea. The community is no longer, means the community is gone. And another quote from a man, a farmer, says, people don't gather in the evenings anymore, no one goes in the fields. I'm telling you, you can walk all over the fields, you won't meet a single person. Another type of loss that I discussed is regarding to infrastructure. The interviews discuss the very visible decay of public spaces, meaning roads, churches, community centers, public transportation, and so on. Many mentioned that all of these infrastructures was left to rot in the year following the revolution, which increased the difficulty of making a living in the countryside. And here is a quote. Well, the problem is well known. In the village, we had no road, no jobs. For the old folks, it wasn't hard to commute. They were used to it, but their children didn't really accept it anymore. Some testimonies talks about also the loss of community work practices. Here we are talking either about this gathering of working in handicrafts and other moments of convivial living in the villages, but also as the quote shows, common labor practices that were essential for agriculture. And here is a quote talking about how people practice crop rotation, which in our area meant that every third year the land was left fallow and animals graze on it, fertilizing it with manure. And it's underlined here the idea that this was done collectively. Another type of loss is that of mechanized agricultural technology, and is a key reason why many peasants could not effectively farm the land they received during decollectivization, which led to them being forced to sell it. Multiple people talk about how in the first year of decollectivization they returned to farming with animals or by hand because they could not afford or could not find any mechanized agricultural technology. And I have here some quotes about it. After the revolution, we got all the land back. But if you don't have a tractor and the equipment you need to pay for it. You cannot manage. Lastly, another important loss is regarding to the loss of food distribution methods. And especially the privatization of the industry and industrialization of milk production hurt these regions that were very relying on animal husbandry, as they are more in a more hilly region. But as well, important is the decline of peasant markets in favor of supermarkets. And here is a quote that captures this by saying more and more people are heading towards supermarkets. They take their car. There is no rain. There's no bad weather. We end up throwing away quite a lot of our products. And regarding the loss of animals, another quote saying that I remember after the revolution, I was one of those who still had cows. But the payment was poor and wouldn't pay you on time. It just put you in a situation where it wasn't worth to have animals anymore, and as an extension to have land. Now, it's important to remark that these losses are not just material losses. They are felt as intangible losses that scar the society fabric and the connection of rural population with their land. It's causing a deep emotional pain, affecting people's sense of dignity, of self-identity, of familiarity with their space and prediction of life. And here there are some quotes that capture exactly this form of embodied pain, and I'm gonna read the second one. We shouldn't have sold it. Investor came to take it from us. I mean, we willingly gave it, but we had no other way. It's a pain in the heart, and here is where it's expressed exactly this embodied pain. It's like I gave away my home. Just imagine having to move from one place to another. In a lot of these interviews, it was very visible that land grabbing, it was not just a matter of being economically affected, but in a very deep emotional way. And that's why you had different forms of expressing this pain, as the quotes here show. I don't know if I stayed on track with the time, but I'm bringing this to conclusions. So in this presentation, I tried to bring an environmental justice perspective to land grabbing. First, I talked about this concept of pinprick land grabbing and how the process in which land is being grabbed hide different levels of violence or actions at the limit of legality. These violences are often made invisible by the manner in which they are produced. And this shows that land grabbing is an issue of injustice. It's about the small and accumulated micro events of injustice. Second, I talked about the emotional violence of land grabbing. As rural life become increasingly precarious in the wake of land concentration, the marginalization of rural communities intensifies. The gradual erosion of land-based livelihoods bring an accumulation of grief, of shame, of a feeling of powerlessness and anxiety, and products this deep, profound emotional harm in people. Lastly, I talk how dispossession occurs through enclosing the means of subsistence from the land, as land was sold because people cannot longer live there or work the land. As land is sold in this pressure, it becomes available for external actors to come and land grab. Land grabbing has made also existing inequalities more prominent, creating what is called transition losers. People who were not able to benefit from the economic and social changes in the post-socialist period and that are left behind. If, for example, younger generations were able to move to the cities, to migrate, to find jobs, to escape these effects of land of rural abandonment, the elderly, the poor, the most vulnerable are left left behind and in an abandoned rural landscape. And yeah, this concludes my presentation, and I'm gonna stop sharing now. Thank you very much for listening.